My name is Kevin. I've been married to my wife, Emily, for 2 years. On this day, we were at the aquarium on a date to celebrate her birthday. However, on our way home, something unexpected happened. Whoa! That's one gorgeous woman. Hey, young lady, how old are you? Out of nowhere, some men approached us from the front and started talking. Both men had a rough, intimidating appearance. Each of them had large tattoos covering their arms. Not wanting to cause trouble, we decided to ignore them and kept walking. I thought they'd eventually go away if we left them alone, but they kept following us persistently. Hey, don't ignore us. Come on, we know you can hear us. Suddenly, the man with black hair grabbed Emily's arm. She showed her irritation as we were forced to stop. Excuse me, but you're being really annoying, she said sharply. Can you just leave us alone already? Emily, undaunted, spoke firmly to the men. I hoped this would calm them down, but it had the opposite effect. Oh, so you're a feisty one, huh? I really like strong-willed women. And if they're as beautiful as you, it's perfect. The men stared at my wife in a way that made my skin crawl. I could see her anger growing with every passing moment. I'm married, she declared. There's no way I'm going to entertain guys like you. She held up her left hand to show them her wedding ring. It seemed they hadn't realized we were married. Wait, you're actually a married couple? That's right. Got a problem with that? No, it's just hilarious. You two are so mismatched. It's ridiculous. She's gorgeous, but the guy next to her is way too dull. They don't match at all. Yeah, no kidding. She must have really settled for less, huh? The men began mocking us, looking back and forth between Emily and me. It's true that my wife is so beautiful that she seems completely out of my league. On the other hand, I'm neither handsome nor tall. Honestly, calling it a miracle that I managed to marry her wouldn't be an exaggeration. I've always thought people might see us as an odd or mismatched couple. Emily, however, grew even angrier as they continued insulting me. Why don't you stop mocking my husband when you know nothing about him? He's 10 times more attractive than you'll ever be. No, scratch that. He's not even in the same league as you guys. Her words filled me with happiness. Even someone like me could feel deeply loved by her, and it was a blessing. But the men weren't fazed at all. She's just saying that because her husband's here. Yeah, once you're married, you can't break up as easily as dating couples can. Or maybe the wife's got some dirt on her husband, huh? If that's the case, how about we rescue you from him? The men were heavily intoxicated. Their breath reeked of alcohol as they spoke, causing my wife to grimace. If you're that desperate to mess around with women, why don't you just go to a place that caters to that? Harassing a married woman like me is insane. We don't care if you're married or already have a man. If she's a good-looking woman, that's all that matters. You're strong-willed, gorgeous, and have a great figure, exactly our type. Forget about your husband for tonight and come have fun with us. The man in sunglasses grabbed my wife's arm as he spoke. However, she forcefully pulled her arm away from him. Wow, the wife's got quite some strength. The man looked slightly surprised as his grip was broken. I could sense that Emily's anger was about to explode. Feeling the urgency of the situation, I decided to warn the men. Excuse me. Please don't make my wife angrier than she already is. If you keep this up, you'll regret it. But my warning fell on deaf ears. The two men looked down on me even more after I spoke. What's this? The nerd speaks up. Just hand over the lady quietly, and we'll be on our way. If it's money you want, we can give you some. The man with black hair pulled out some coins from his wallet and threw them at me. Hey! What do you think you're doing to my husband? I thought if I tossed some cash, he'd be willing to share his wife. I have no intention of handing my wife over to you. Please, I'm asking you to stop bothering us any further. I'd also prefer to avoid this turning into something bigger. What, are you scared of us? No, it's not you I'm afraid of. When I answered in a low voice, the two men looked slightly annoyed. Come on, just admit it, you are scared of us. You're really trembling inside, aren't you? The man with black hair leaned in close to my face as he spoke. I was indeed scared of them, but there was something I feared even more. However, the man assumed I was cowering and began to threaten me physically, bringing his fist close to me. If you let us have your wife, we won't lay a hand on you. Just lend her to us for tonight. If you refuse, you know what's going to happen, don't you? What's going to happen? You might just end up being our stress relief. We haven't had the chance to really cut loose and cause some chaos lately. Stop saying such ridiculous things. If you touch my husband, I won't let you get away with it. And what exactly can you do? Don't you realize we're gangs? The word gang made my wife react strongly. I had already suspected they were rough characters, but learning they were gang genuinely shocked me as well. Are you guys really gang members? That's right. We're gang from the Great Dragon Gang Group. Great Dragon Gang Group, huh? My wife murmured softly. Hey, does the wife know about the Great Dragon Gang Group? Of course. They're a well-known gang in this area. Really? Looks like we've made a name for ourselves. The men, oblivious to the reality of the situation, spoke with smug satisfaction. Their confidence would only last for so long. However, after revealing they were gang, they became even more arrogant. So, young lady, you'll be spending time with us tonight, right? Let's have a fun night together, baby. We'll cover the entire hotel bill, no problem. In return, you just need to give us the best service imaginable. With that, the men started to surround my wife and attempted to lead her away. I grabbed one of the men's arms tightly. Stop it. Please. Hey, back off, you annoying pest. You're just a bystander, so stay out of this. I'm not a bystander. Emily is my wife. I'm not handing her over to anyone. Leave us alone. I shouted at them with all the courage I could muster. I was terrified, of course, but as a man, I felt I had to stand my ground. However, this only served to anger the men. One of them shook off my grip violently and delivered a hard punch straight to my face. You're in the way. The impact knocked me to the ground. Emily immediately rushed over to me. Kevin. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. With her help, I slowly got back on my feet. Then, Emily turned to the men, her face contorted with rage, glaring at them like a demon. Call your bosses. Call every last one of them. I thought this was bad. However, the men showed no sense of danger whatsoever. They burst into laughter while looking at my wife. What's wrong with you, young lady? I've had enough of this. Just call your bosses already, will you? Or are you too low rank to even contact them? What? Are you mocking us? Young lady, even we won't let you off the hook if you piss us off too much. It seemed these two couldn't stand being looked down on. Now their anger was directed at Emily. However, she remained unfazed, standing firm without a hint of fear. There was a reason for her unshaken confidence. I'm not scared of the likes of you. Well, you really are tough, huh? But you'd better stop provoking the gang, young lady. You might end up dead if you're not careful. That's my line. If you kneel and apologize to my husband right now, I might let you off the hook this time. If you're not willing to reflect on your actions, I have other ways to deal with you. When my wife said this, the men burst out laughing again. It was clear they completely underestimated us. And what would that be? Are you going to call the police? Calling the police would put us at a disadvantage too, so I won't be doing that. Instead, I'll send you to hell in another way. Really? Now I'm curious what this hell of yours looks like. Go ahead, try to scare us. Fine, just remember, you asked for this. I instinctively knew these two were finished. However, the men themselves still showed no sense of danger. Ignoring their arrogance, my wife took out her phone and began making a call. She finished her conversation after about 5 minutes. After hanging up, she turned to the men with a confident, almost wicked smile. "Your hell is about to begin. Make sure you don't run away, okay?" "What? Who did you call?" "Someone you're very familiar with, I'm sure." "You must be so low-ranking you didn't even recognize me." "What the hell are you talking about? Just tell us who you called." The men repeatedly demanded to know who my wife had called, but she ignored them entirely. About 10 minutes later, a sleek black luxury car pulled up near us. From it emerged a man with an imposing presence, exuding an aura of danger. The moment the two men saw him, they froze as if time had stopped. "Wait, hold on. Is that?" They turned pale, their bravado completely shattered. The man walked toward them with measured steps. "You the idiots who tried to mess with Emily? From the Great Dragon Gang Group, huh? Wait, please. Is your wife really acquainted with Mr. Yates, the leader of the Armstrong Gang Group?" "Acquainted? This man is my dad." With that one sentence from my wife, the two men turned ghostly pale. "You're seriously Mr. Yates's daughter?" "That's right. Emily is my daughter, no doubt about it." "And you, as members of the Great Dragon Gang Group, didn't know that?" "We're so sorry. We had no idea." Their earlier arrogance was completely gone, replaced by utter submissiveness. My father-in-law is the leader of the gang group known as the Armstrong Gang Group, and my wife is his daughter. Of course, I knew this when I decided to marry her. The moment the two men realized who my wife really was, their attitudes changed drastically, and they dropped to their knees, bowing deeply. "We're so sorry for our disrespect. Please, we beg you, keep this incident from reaching the president, Mr. Sullivan." "Don't give me that crap. I went out of my way to come here myself. You think I'd let you off so easily? For now, you're coming back to our office. We'll have a nice, long talk there with my men." The men began trembling as my father-in-law addressed them with a stern expression. "Well, why don't you get in my car now?" The men, unable to resist, were forcibly ushered into the car. My wife and I also headed to the Armstrong Gang Group's office. When we arrived, all the members of the Armstrong Gang Group were present. It seemed my father-in-law had already informed them about the situation. The clan members directed piercing gazes at the two men, who had now become nothing more than objects of scorn. The men were like a sideshow attraction, completely humiliated. My father-in-law, with a smug grin on his face, approached the two men who were forced to sit on their knees in the middle of the room. "You two really had some bad luck messing with my daughter. When it comes to family, I show no mercy. Get ready for the delightful hell that awaits you." The two men were drenched in cold sweat. In a desperate attempt to seek forgiveness, they prostrated themselves before my father-in-law. "We deeply regret harassing your daughter. Please, let us resolve this peacefully. We'll pay whatever amount you ask for." "Oh, you'll definitely be paying. But before that, I think I'd like to have a word with your president, Mr. Sullivan." "Mr. Sullivan." At the mention of Sullivan's name, the two men turned even paler. It was obvious they wanted to avoid involving Mr. Sullivan at all costs. "Please, we beg you. Don't involve Mr. Sullivan." "Why not? Got something to hide?" "Actually, we caused some trouble not long ago, and we were told that if we screwed up again, we'd be kicked out. We really can't afford to lose our jobs." The two men desperately begged for forgiveness. However, my father-in-law ignored their pleas and began making a phone call. The recipient was likely Mr. Sullivan of the Great Dragon Gang Group. The call ended in just a few minutes. "Your president, Mr. Sullivan, agreed without hesitation to come over. He also said he's looking forward to having a thorough talk with you too." "You're kidding me. This is the end." The men's faces were filled with despair. Not long after, Mr. Sullivan of the Great Dragon Gang Group arrived at the office. My father-in-law and Mr. Sullivan had a long-standing relationship, and I had met him a few times before. The moment the two men saw Mr. Sullivan, they lowered their heads and began trembling. Mr. Sullivan briskly approached them where they knelt. "We're sorry. We didn't realize she was the daughter of the Armstrong Gang Group's leader." "That doesn't matter. The fact remains that you caused trouble for someone connected to the Armstrong Gang Group, doesn't it? Did you at least apologize properly?" "Yes, we did." "But they wouldn't forgive us." "Of course not. You tried to insult the family of someone as important as leader Mr. Yates." Mr. Sullivan then walked over to stand before Emily and me. He offered a sincere and respectful apology. "I sincerely apologize for my idiots causing trouble during your outing. And on Emily's birthday, no less." Of course, neither my wife nor I had any intention of blaming Mr. Sullivan. We were grateful to him for how well he had treated us as a couple, and we owed him a lot. "Mr. Sullivan, please raise your head. The ones at fault here are these two. You don't need to worry about it. Of course, they will take full responsibility for their actions. Yes, I fully intend to punish these idiots, so don't worry." Afterward, Mr. Sullivan bowed to my father-in-law as well, apologizing for the trouble caused by his men. However, it was clear that my father-in-law hadn't summoned him to berate him. Once the formalities were over, Mr. Sullivan turned back to the two men. His expression was icy cold as he addressed them. "You're both fired as of today." "Fired? And I'm not letting you off that easily. As punishment for causing trouble with the Armstrong Gang Group, you'll also pay a fine of $1 million. $1 million? We don't have that kind of money." "That's insane. You already stole money from the group not long ago, didn't you? Before that, you extorted civilians and ended up drawing police attention. This $1 million includes compensation for all the trouble you've caused up until now. You two can work together and pay the fine to me. Got it?" The men sat in stunned silence at the impossibly large amount. "I admit we've caused trouble for the Great Dragon Gang Group, but $1 million is just unrealistic." "Mr. Sullivan, you know we don't have that kind of money, right? That's not my problem. What I say is final. This is absurd. It's your own fault, isn't it? If you complain any further, I can make it $2 million. Please don't do that." The two were low-ranking gang who had taken advantage of their status to commit countless misdeeds. It was clear that Mr. Sullivan was fed up with their behavior. In fact, it seemed he had already planned to fire them even before this incident. Realizing they were cornered, the two men tried to slip away when no one was looking. However, they were immediately subdued by my wife. "Where do you think you're going?" The men stared in shock at her strength. At this point, my father-in-law spoke up. "Looks like we'll have to start by breaking that cocky attitude of yours. Trying to run away while we're watching? That takes some guts. We're sorry. It was just an impulse. For now, we'll fix your attitude ourselves. What are you going to do to us? What do you think? We're gang, so it's gotta be that." With that, my father-in-law gave orders to a nearby senior member. "Beat them up for 30 minutes right here. Of course, have the entire Armstrong Gang Group join in." The gang members nodded firmly in agreement. Meanwhile, the two men turned pale with fear. "Please, wait. We're sorry for trying to run. Just spare us from the violence, we beg you. Getting beaten by the entire Armstrong Gang Group would completely drain us. Scared of violence, even though you're gang? Don't make me laugh. You've beaten plenty of people for no reason, haven't you? Think of this as payback on their behalf." Despite desperately begging for mercy, the two men were ignored by my father-in-law, who instructed the gang members to beat them up on the spot. Following his orders, the gang members began pummeling the two. By the time the promised 30 minutes had passed, the men were in a pitiful state. Their faces were swollen and red, their eyes half open. The two men were barely able to catch their breath. My father-in-law approached them with a smug grin. "Have you learned your lesson yet? Sorry. Please, no more. We can't take it." The two men trembled violently as they looked at him. My father-in-law is a legendary gang, known for having taken down numerous organizations in the past. If he were to hit them seriously, it could very well cost them their lives. It was clear that the two men were utterly terrified of him. "Relax," he said. "I don't waste my time with petty fights. I won't lay a hand on you myself. Instead, you'll pay for your sins with money." "What?" "On top of the $1 million demanded by Mr. Sullivan, I'm personally charging you $100,000 in damages. You don't have to pay it all at once. Just pay me $10,000 a month." $10,000 a month. The two turned pale at the figure my father-in-law had presented. Then the man with black hair hesitantly revealed something. "Actually, we also have about $50,000 in debt to a loan shark. We're already drowning in repayments, so coming up with more money is impossible." "So, you're saying you can't pay the $1 million either?" "Yes. And why did you borrow money in the first place?" The two men fell silent in response to my father-in-law's question. From their expressions, it was clear they didn't want to talk about it. "If you don't want to talk, that's fine. But you'll still pay, no matter what. That includes the $1 million Mr. Sullivan is demanding." "Wait. That much money will leave us in debt for the rest of our lives. Please, can't you reduce the amount somehow?" The two men bowed deeply to my father-in-law and Mr. Sullivan, pleading for leniency. After a moment of silence, my wife offered a suggestion. "Then how about this? If they can beat me in a challenge, the debt will be forgiven. If Dad and Mr. Sullivan agree, I wouldn't mind giving them a chance." "That's an interesting idea," my father-in-law said. "I have no problem with it. And honestly, I don't see Emily losing." Both my father-in-law and Mr. Sullivan quickly agreed to the proposal. The two men looked at them in shock. "Are you serious? If we win, the debt is erased?" "Only if you win. So, what do you say? Want to take on Emily in a challenge? We're fine with it being 2 against 1. I don't have even the slightest intention of losing to you two." "In that case..." The two men, oblivious to what was coming, suddenly brightened up. "We'll take the challenge. Are you really okay with it being 2 against 1? I don't mind at all. Whether it's 1 or 2 of you, it doesn't make much difference to me." And so, the two agreed to a 2-on-1 challenge against my wife. They seemed confident that they could win. "Since it'd be shameful for us to strike first, feel free to come at us," one of them taunted. It was clear they completely underestimated her. However, they were met with a single, powerful punch from my wife, which sent them sprawling to the ground. Despite getting up several times to fight back, not a single one of their punches landed, and they ultimately lost. Lying defeated, they stared at my wife in disbelief. "How can you be that strong? There's no way you're just a normal woman. You shouldn't underestimate someone just because they're a woman." Back in the day, I was called the legendary boss of an all-female biker gang. I was known for being unbeatable. "Guys like you are nothing to me. A biker gang." Until she turned 20, my wife was the leader of a feared and infamous gang. During her time in the gang, she was highly respected and feared in that world. I met her after she had retired from that life, so I didn't know much about her past. Even today, the group she founded is remembered as one of the strongest ever. Learning the truth about her, the two men seemed to come to terms with their defeat and fell silent. My wife, however, wasn't done. "You two punched my husband, didn't you? Don't you have something to say to him? We're sorry for hitting you earlier." At her urging, the two bowed their heads deeply to me. "It's fine, really," I said. "I'm not badly hurt or anything. As long as my wife is safe, that's all that mattered to me." But she wasn't satisfied with just an apology. Just bowing your head isn't enough. Get on your knees and show some real sincerity. Reluctantly, the two knelt on the floor and pressed their foreheads to the ground. I found myself unsure of what to say to them. Then my father-in-law spoke up. You lost to Emily, so as agreed, you'll still have to pay the money. Make sure you pay the full $1.1 million. The two men looked tearful at his words. We can't. Like we said earlier, we don't have that kind of money. After all this, couldn't you reduce the amount a little? Don't you dare try to talk your way out of this. You think I'll just say fine and let it slide? If you don't have the money, you'll start working to pay it off starting tomorrow. Working. If you don't have the cash, then you'll have to earn it yourselves. No way. The two men stared at my father-in-law with frightened eyes, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. My father-in-law shot the two men a sinister grin. Don't worry, I'm not going to take your lives or anything drastic. The two men looked slightly relieved at my father-in-law's response. They had clearly been terrified that their lives might be taken on the spot. But instead, you'll be doing a job that comes with some serious risks. A job? What kind of job? Something every gang loves: work at sea. You'll be catching tuna. And of course, I'll make sure you're well insured. The men's faces turned pale again. They clearly understood how dangerous sea work could be. Desperate, they bowed their heads repeatedly, begging for a way out, but my father-in-law ignored their pleas. The decision was final. The next day, the two were insured with high-value policies and sent off to a distant coastal town. They would work on a fishing vessel until they earned enough to pay off their debt to my father-in-law and Mr. Sullivan. However, working at sea is no joke, it's a life-threatening job. I'd heard that others from the Armstrong gang group had been sent to the boats as punishment, and some had gone missing within a month. While the job could earn them the money they owed, the danger was just as real. This, however, was the result of their own actions. I felt a tinge of pity, but ultimately, it was their own fault. Although the matter was settled for now, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. You look down. What's on your mind? I was just thinking. I wish I could be a more dependable, manly husband for you. The other day, you were the one who had to protect me. I felt like I wasn't cool enough. I hated feeling weak. Having a strong and amazing wife only made me feel that way even more. Kevin, you're already manly and cool, she said. You tried so hard to protect me the other day. It made me so happy. She said this with flushed cheeks and a warm smile. Her words lifted a heavy burden from my heart. Then, looking directly into my eyes, she continued. Kevin, you're perfect just the way you are. I love your kindness and the way you always care about others. Everyone has their own strengths, and you should focus on making yours shine. And for the record, I love you exactly as you are. In that moment, I felt deeply grateful to have married her. I vowed to dedicate myself to making my incredible wife as happy as she could possibly be.